We vetted him. You are the third one we are vetting. If you are approved by this House to become the Minister for Agriculture. And the last one we vetted, I asked him a question. I told him, do you know what you're getting into? He told me, yes, I know. I want to ask you also, do you know what you're getting into that ministry? You need to tell me more what you think of that. The second issue is the people or the ministry concentrates so much on agriculture and normally forgets about livestock. And in many countries in the world, their GDP growth is even contributed much higher by livestock than agriculture. What do you think you will do in the livestock sector so that the GDP, the livestock sector can contribute to the GDP of the country? And what is your position on the vaccine that's being proposed to give to livestock in this country? What do you think it is? Or how will you implement it? Or what are your views on that thing?
Point of order.
Yes.
I think if you allowed 3 questions, because many of the questions you will easily answer them with, many responses.
Yes, that's what I was going to do. Posting.
Thank you, Chairman, Speaker. To the nominee, Honorable,
had been asked by the majority leader about the 2 to 3 years, which because they are kind of the same, because I'm the third minister. First of all, of course, is to say that I've been happy to serve, no matter how the period, you're happy to serve, because the idea is to make a difference. And sometimes it is not how the length of time that you do a job in, it is what you put into the time that you have got that you can make a difference in. I have no idea why 2 years into government, I was invited by the 3 previous including the current president, because obviously they are appointing authorities. But I want to answer your question, and perhaps related to also to Honorable Koeshi's question. You asked me whether I know what I'm getting myself into. And from the questions that you have heard from Honorable Koesh, yes, I can relate to your question and what you are asking regarding the prices and so on. Mr. Chairman, you will remember that one day in 2020, I stood outside Afia House, and it is on record even in the media. I pointed at Afia House, and I said that there are many cartels in this building. I said it myself. It was not said by other people. I am the one who said it sitting in there. So as I went into the ministry, I was quite aware that there are cartels. And I'm quite aware that even this one, there are cartels in it. That's the first thing. The second thing is to say that cartels fight back. Cartels will fight back. And some of the stuff that you are hearing coming out is a question of cartels fighting back. Not only would I expect them to fight me back once you start fighting them, in fact, I'm ready for the battle, because I know the battle is going to come. And the cartels will definitely fight back. But I want to say that irrespective of the war that is clearly going to be there are sufficient people in Kenya. There are enough people in the ministry, there are enough people in this parliament, there are enough people in Kenyans out there who are going to be extremely supportive in that fight. I am confident about that. And your job in this house, as you make sure that you oversight, is also to make sure that you assist us also, in those battles with the cartels, that you'll obviously come and fight back so that they can take. In the area of COVID, for example, and I pointed it out, is that as we started the restructuring of KEMSA, and I want to say to Honorable Koech that, it is very difficult for us to remember back at the crisis that we had in 2019, and as particularly after the 12th of March of 2020, when the pandemic was actually declared globally. Mr. Chairman, we were faced by a severe situation. What we are calling what today sells for nothing, which is a mask for your face, was so rare that people were willing in the streets of Nairobi to pay 3,000, 5,000 shillings for a mask, which is now free in most places and you can take. So when people say, and part of the big question regarding that period and part of the COVID billionaire issues and so on that we have had to do with the prices of issues, the prices of goods, the prices of commodities and health, and what was necessary to contain this disease in our country. Mr. Speaker, I remember appearing in this House to explain these issues and to say at that time in 2020, for example, we were looking for anybody who could give us a mask. And yes, I am the first person to admit that it wasn't an opportune time, that indeed there was abuse of process in KEMSA and other procuring agencies at that time, and not just in the Ministry of Health, but widely. But I think the major concern, the major interest at the time, and I can give you one clear example. For instance, the PPEs. We were looking for protection gear for our doctors and nurses. We didn't have any. A PPE could easily sell for 15,000 shillings, 9,000 shillings, etc. And I can tell you, Honorable Koech, that if they came at 20,000 shillings, we would have bought them. Because it's a question of, are you going to wait or are you going to buy at whatever price to save lives? Money almost begins to take a secondary position when it comes to life and death. And that is what it was. But we are also the same people who worked on it. What steps did we take? I called all the manufacturers of the materials. I sat outside my office with a bottle of water, testing materials to see whether they could be able to be used for PPEs with the experts in the Ministry of Health. And consequent to that, we were able to use our own people in Shona, in Athi River, in Nakuru. We were able to use our own people to produce the same materials at a quarter of the price. And now today, the same PPEs can be produced in our country at 2,000 shillings or less than 2,000 shillings. So it wasn't an appropriate time. A lot of mistakes were made, and I'll tell you that and confirm that indeed there were mistakes made. But I would also like to say that at the prices that I was saying, and this is what I explained to Parliament, and I challenged this House, at the time that we were buying PPEs at, say, 9,000 shillings, I said I would like somebody to show me any place where the PPE was selling at less than that price. And I remember, Mr. Chairman, going to Aga Khan Hospital, going to Nairobi Hospital. Everybody was desperate and the prices were crazy all over the town. It wasn't that the Ministry of Health was buying those items at a higher price than the rest of the world or the rest of the country. We were buying it at the market prices at that time. And this is something that I have explained, at length. Mr. Chairman, the handling of COVID-19 at that time was such a nightmare. It was such a nightmare that the cost to people, the cost of lives, every day we would wake up to be told that 10,000 people are being buried in New York. The Italian government has given up and surrendered, that everybody is dying. In South America, people are being dragged out of houses and being burnt outside, they are cremated outside their own houses. So it wasn't a time that people were making very, very rational decisions. It was a desperate period, but we did what we had to do. And Kenya, by the way, is one of the countries that got praised because of the work that they did. And Mr. Chairman, I will say this. I am prepared to do, I take responsibility, and I did, and I said everything that happened that was not correct in my ministry, and throughout that COVID period, we must take responsibility because it was there. The negatives, I take responsibility. The positives, I give credit to the team that was working at the ministry. All the members of the National Emergency Response Committee, of which I chaired, that included members of the Defense Forces, members of all ministries that were involved. We took collective decisions. in the issue of vaccines, we took collective decisions for vaccines. And the whole issue of the expenditure on vaccines, Mr. Chairman, is actually exaggerated. Because 90% of the vaccines that we actually used in Kenya were donated. There were donations from the United States government, from the World Health Organization, from European governments. Yes, they were of a great value, and they were valued at a lot of money, but they were free. We got a lot of those things for free. We didn't actually buy a lot of those ones. The ones that we bought, the ones that we ordered from Johnson & Johnson in South Africa. In fact, the quantity that we were supposed to get, we never even utilized in full, because by the time we had developed immunity and stopped the delivery of. So there were several issues that one can speak about. And as for KEMSA, it is true. When I said that there are cartels out there, it was true. And what did we do? What did I do as minister? You remember, Mr. Chairman, that we carried out a complete re-engineering of KEMSA. Change of staff, restructuring the organization, at least in the time when I was there. So we did take action about it. And I'm the one who invited the investigating authorities to come and go through it so that we can see how we can change the entire structure to do a better job in a crisis like that. For me, Mr. Chairman, what I say is that I hope, because there will be another pandemic, it is not a question of whether it will be there. It's not a question of if it will come. Looking at the global situation today, it is very likely that we are going to get some zoonotic and other pathogens that will cause pandemics in the future. And it's a question of being prepared for it and hope to God that there will be somebody sitting in those offices where he or she will have to make some very difficult decisions, notwithstanding the fact that eventually they could be verified for those decisions. But I hope to God they will have the guts to go on anyway and save lives. Mr. Chairman, on the issue of tea, and I know that this is an issue because of the tea that is actually lying in Mombasa, the Mombasa auction. Mr. Chairman, I know that my predecessor had set a committee to deal with the issue of tea, and I want to say that I agree with those people who are saying that there is an interference of businesses that governments can go to a length to do and mess the process in the first place. So there is a degree of regulation that you want to carry out, and indeed we will carry out some regulation, but the regulation will be to improve the market. Our job, as you asked about what is the ministry going itself doing, given the fact that it is a Schedule 4 divides it amongst both the county governments and the national government. I think if you look at Schedule 4, you'll see that the breadth of involvement of the national government is quite large. And if you are involved in the policy, if you are involved in research, if you are involved in financing, if you are involved in creating markets for these products, then you will have to work, as you rightly said, in the joint committee of both the county governments and the national government. Again, I would like to confirm that this is not the first time I'm going to do this. During the COVID period or during my days as Cabinet Secretary for Health, that's what we did. We had constant communication. We had several meetings with the CECs for health. And I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, we even managed to bring in to the ministry the CECs for health to be part of the teams in the Ministry of Health at headquarters, so that you can create the linkages between the county governments and the national and the national government. So part of the price stabilization is to make sure that we are opening new markets. You know that our biggest competitors in the tea sector is China and India, and they have got varieties of tea that they produce. But we must also ensure something else and this is where the regulatory framework comes in. we must make sure that even as we talk about the prices, we talk about the quality of tea that we are producing. We must ensure that we have got a minimum regulated quality of tea that can be called the Kenya tea. Because unless we do that, our tea is famous all over the world because of quality, not because of the quantity. So we must ensure that we preserve and secure the quality of our tea as much as we can, even as we open new markets for it. Mr. Chairman, yeah, sorry.
No, touch on overemphasis on crops as opposed to livestock.
I was getting there, Mr. Chairman.
And then climate change.
Yeah.
So that we go to other questions.
I was getting there, Mr. Chairman. I think the honorable member said that livestock has got the capability and possibility of actually becoming a bigger industry, and that is true, because if you look at countries like Ethiopia, our neighbors out here, the leather industry in Ethiopia is huge. But again, Mr. Chairman, we must look at the livestock farming in its holistic form, because when we talk about the animals that are grazing, we have to go back to that farmer. And I said earlier, and I go back to it, we have got to make sure that that farmer is earning his bit. Part of the measures that we must take, especially in the pastoralist community, is education and extension farming, extension livestock experts. They must talk to our livestock grazers and our livestock keepers and the breeders themselves. Because part of the way that we can develop the leather industry is it comes back all the way to the skin that the animal is walking in. Because that is where the quality of the leather first starts. For example, if you have got barbed wire in the compound and a cow grazes along the barbed wire and tears just a little bit on its skin, that leather is already affected. It is as complicated as that. Mr. Speaker, you'll find that the leather that we are producing in terms of quality is second and third grade. So we have got to go back to the farmer and say, as you keep the cow, since you want to make money, make sure that the skin, the hides and skins are taken care of. We must go all the way to the guys who are not just feeding the cows. What feedstuffs are we giving these cows? And you'll find that when we are looking at a basic cow for export, 200 kilos is the average weight of our cows. Out there, they are looking for 350 kilograms cows. So in terms of meat, in terms of hides and skins, it's an area that we need to work on and improve. And we need to work with the pastoralist community. We must sit together and work on those ideas that are there, because there is nothing very, very new. They know it. Now, when it comes to the leather industry, the formation of the leather park in Machakos is a huge development for us. It's a big thing. And so we must make use of it. This is a time when we can get the Gushis of this world, coming here so that we can make proper leather. The affluent plant, which has already been constructed, is actually the biggest single contribution in terms of the leather industry that we want to develop. And I'll be there, and I'll make sure that the plant is complete, and also the engagement with the pastoralists as well as other livestock farmers, is complete and engaged. Mr. Chairman, I also want to talk about the policy on insurance, because I think it's crucial. We must make sure that our farmers, the pastoralists, have insurance for cattle. Because if they do not have insurance, and I have been there at one time, I remember distinctly, Mr. Chairman, going to Mandela at one time, trying to get the farmers to agree to sell their cows, because KMC was buying them, but they were not agreeing to sell. So there is also a cultural aspect that we have to deal with, and agree that it is there. And say to them that, look, when times come for drought, let's sell these cows, so that then we can create a revolving fund, so that at the time when the rains come, we can go back and restock the cattle. And I think it's also important to teach this issue of insurance, because largely there is no communication on it. Yet, there are very many organizations that are involved in this insurance for livestock. And I think we must push that agenda, and I'll be at the forefront of ensuring that it is there. But more than the insurance is also to make sure that the insurance premiums are affordable. So there is no point of saying there is livestock insurance, but the insurance is too high. People can't afford it. So we have got to go back and ask ourselves, how do we make sure that there is so much livestock, there are so many cows that are being insured, that in terms of the insurance premiums, they can come down. Because insurance works on the basis of probability. The probability that something bad is going to happen diminishes as long as the base itself is becoming, has been widened. So there's a lot to do, I agree. I cannot profess to be an expert sitting here, but I think there is the will, and I intend to work on it. Mr. Chairman, you'll allow me to also talk about the environment, because it has also been raised by Honorable Gikaria. The issue of the environment and farming. Mr. Chairman, as we said, there is an issue on this climate change that is right in front of us, and that is the issue to do with the European Union deforestation regulation, where the European Union is coming out with the rules that say that if we are deforesting to plant crops or to farm, we will not be able to export our commodities, animals, and products to the European Union. Now, this is something that we can't afford, because that is our biggest market for virtually most of our agricultural products. So it is not just because they are asking us to do it. And Mr. Chairman, I like to say that in terms of what the Europeans have set as a standard of climate change or climate specifications that they want to set, in my opinion, Kenya is actually ahead of it. Because, Mr. Chairman, not only are we not cutting forests in order to plant things like coffee. For example, in the coffee sector, we are actually planting trees in the coffee farms. We are planting grevillea trees that grow in tandem with the coffee. In any event, coffee is a tree itself. So when it comes to the issue of planting, you know, being the EU DR regulations, I think we are going to meet the, I suppose the deadline is this year, but I think we are going to discuss with them and meet that their demand. But more importantly, Mr. Chairman, is that agroforestry is also agriculture. And
his question was, the farmer used to know that you planned at the end of February, the rains will be there 1st March. Now it's not the case. How are you going to keep information flow to the farmer on the changing patterns of weather?
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman.
That's what he asked. And yeah.
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman. But I did want to raise this issue of EUDR because it is part and parcel of this thing of climate change. And Mr. Chairman, technology is going to assist us. The biggest thing in terms of the Honorable Gikaria's question is technology. We all know that these days the meteorology department can actually predict very well. If you look at your mobile app and look at it, we can predict very well. There was a time when we talk about Rasha, pale na pale, you know, which was never going to happen. But I think that we are very confident. And as AI develops, the predictability and our ability to tell the weather is going to become more and more precise. And therefore, at that point, what then do we do? Because information is one thing, but what do you do when you do it? We need drought-resistant crops, drought-resistant animals that can withstand higher heat and longer and higher temperatures that currently exist. This is a scientific issue, and we are going to work with the research organizations to make sure that at least we mitigate part of what can be very severe natural disasters.
Thank you. Yes, Janet.
Chairman, I know the nominee was once a politician, but he has cleverly evaded the issue of the vaccine. And we know each other why he's doing that.
Mr. Chairman, it is indeed true that I was once a politician, but that is not. But I wasn't evading the question, because the matter is very simple to me, and in consultation with those in agriculture, we have also come to the same conclusion. I think the long and short of it is the following. Number one is that my understanding is that the whole vaccination process is to address two diseases. It is to address the PPR and foot and mouth disease. That's what the issue is about. Mr. Chairman, you know, talked about earlier about social media and what can be propaganda and otherwise. And I think the most important thing is to involve those involved in the industry, including the members of this House, is to involve those involved with the information that we have. And say, this is a vaccine. It is being made by Kevavapi, who are our own people. It is for this and this purpose. We only vaccinate about 10% of our livestock. We want to vaccinate more than that. But the point of the matter is this. The cow, as I said earlier, belongs to an individual. It doesn't belong to the government. The goat belongs to an individual, not to the government. So the matter is simple. Here is a vaccine. It is for foot and mouth disease. You have a goat. Do you want the goat to be vaccinated? You say, yes, I want to be vaccinated. We vaccinate. You say, no, I don't want my goat to be vaccinated. Sawa. Do you have a cow? Do you want the cow to be vaccinated? This is the reason why it is to be vaccinated. You say, yes, we vaccinate. You say, no, we don't vaccinate. Allah?
Thank you. Yes, Robert.
Point of order, Honorable Chairman, point of order.
Yes, Mishi.
I think, Chairman, on the same breath, because there is a lot of misconception and a lot of negative narrative. So we wanted to hear from the nominee, how is he going to address to the public and put some trust to the public regarding the vaccination? We wanted to hear on that perspective.
Thank you, Honorable Mishi. The communication aspect of it is huge. The communication aspect of this is very big. And I'm going to use the experts. I'm going to use the experts in Kevavapi. I'm going to use the experts who understand this very well to be actually the lead communicators, just like we did with COVID, where we had the doctors themselves explain the issue. We also want to use the veterinary officers to themselves explain what we are trying to do. So you can be sure, Honorable Member, that I am going to put a very robust communication system on this matter.
Robert Mbui,
Thank
Baya, Murugara.
Speaker, maybe before we leave that issue of vaccines,
Yes.
because I remember CS Mutai telling us, if I can get it, you can get it on COVID. And largely, the issue of vaccines, the problem has been misinformation and the people communicating. Because the ministry has left it to the political class to communicate, and probably, should he be approved, is the area around that communication that he will need to look into, so that the right people, as you say, communicate, but also communicate the right information to the car owners. Because again, if we leave it to the members of the public to decide, since the cow is mine, and I base my decision on misinformation, I could decide not to vaccinate my cow to my detriment and the detriment of the country's productivity. Probably, since he has already answered that, but just for information, Honorable Speaker, that should he be approved, that's some of the challenges you find.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Hold
As I
there,
said,
you'll come to
sorry.
that. Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The nominee says that he is very passionate to assist Kenyan farmers. Now, I have very quick concerns. One, there was this major scandal of fake fertilizer that made our Kenyan farmers lose very heavily. with your passion, will you consider initiating a process of compensating those farmers that lost, negatively, that were affected negatively by this scandal? There's also media reports, and this is what members here are talking about, indicating that despite there being no budgetary allocation, this issue of livestock vaccination is actually being propagated by multinationals that want to test vaccines on our animals. What is your comment on that? And finally, the government has been accused in the recent past of regulation of private business, especially agriculture. I mean, there's regulations on you have to get a license to grow, a license to harvest, a license to transport, a license to store, a license to sell. What is your comment on that? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Nominee, I would like to ask you the following question. One, just on the oil crops and the cost of edible oils in Kenya, there has been a over-reliance on the importation of edible oils. And yet this country, especially at the coast, has huge potential to actually bring down the cost of edible oils and actually grow our GDP. Crops like coconut, cashew nuts, ground nuts, and many other nuts that grow at the coast. But there has been little investment in this sector, especially there. And farmers there feel that they have lost their land, and production, and there's nothing they get out of the land because
the issue of the fake fertilizers that was raised, because it has been raised by quite a number of members, and to answer as follows. Number one is that obviously that was an extremely unfortunate thing to do. Mr. Chairman, there are two areas that I find almost reasonable. One of them is the area of seeds, fake seeds, and the other one is fake fertilizers. Because that issue actually affects not only food security, but actually national security. Because if you grow for a whole year, you are growing something and it was fake from the beginning, or you give your cows fake feeds and they die, Mr. Chairman, this is a matter that I would like even to work with this House to create more civility in terms of the penalties that are involved when people sell fake fertilizers, when people sell fake seeds. This is an area where, if approved, Mr. Chairman, I would like to work with this House to create that civility. And to do so, I cannot, sitting here today, talk about what I can do in terms of the farmers who have lost. This is a matter that I would have to go into the ministry, look at it, discuss it with perhaps Treasury, and see what can be done. But I take your point that a loss was made, and somebody benefited from it, but nobody was compensated, for the loss. And it's a matter that I take and I'll take to heart. Mr. Chairman, on the issue of livestock vaccination, I spoke to it, and I spoke about what I believe. And obviously, sitting in the office, I will have the information at my fingertips. I will be clear. This is a vaccine that is being made locally by Kevavapi. One of the things that I would like to say as a highlight to all the things that I have been asked, including the pesticides that I think Mheshimiwa Ferdinand spoke about, is to say that there will be a rule of thumb that, in my opinion, the ministry, if approved, would adopt. Number one is this: whether GMO, whether pesticide, whether fertilizer, if that product is not being used in its country of origin, it will not be used in Kenya. If it is a fertilizer, if it is a GMO product, if it is a seed.
Do you know the case of Roundup?
Yes, I'm aware of the case of Roundup. I'm conversant with that debate, Mr. Chairman. In fact, there was a luring in Australia, I think it's this week or last week, that was made on the same, where in Australia they said that it is not carcinogenic, but this is something that I will sit with my scientists and my decided decisions will be made on the basis of science and data. Because it is not enough that I proclaim here, but I can tell you that there will be no product that is going to be sold in this country under my watch in the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock that is going to be a product being tested here. We are not guinea pigs. We will not be used by anybody as guinea pigs. I am aware, Mr. Chairman, for example, there are some organizations overseas that are rebranding their products so that instead of coming as the main product which has been banned overseas, they rebrand themselves as another product so that we can pass it here. And I can tell you that we will be as vigilant as we can be to ensure that we protect our farmers as well as our private sector players. In terms of the taxation regime, because I think, Honorable Member, that's what you are referring to. Yeah, the regulations and the